Yes, I don't think the questions have got anything to do with what we announced here, but nevertheless, I'm prepared to answer them. On this issue of terminology, I mean to say, because I'm hearing for the first time that a foreign national is also an undocumented person. That is not true. We've got many South Africans who are not documented. So to substitute documentation for illegality is wrong. And I'm not sure whether in English the word foreign is banned. I hear all the other countries using it. In fact, I'll even argue that worse than us, because countries have got ministries of foreign affairs, and they call them that. We are the only country that has got what we call DERCO. All other countries, if you check around the world, there's a Minister of Foreign Affairs. Is that xenophobic? Why is it xenophobic when it's used in South Africa? I've come to believe that it looks like the word xenophobia is now being invented for South Africa only. Any other country can do anything. If it's done in South Africa, it's xenophobia. So I'm not going to agree with you that we must replace the word foreign by undocumented. And I'm serious when I say there are still many South Africans which are not documented, because I work in Home Affairs. In fact, to give you an outline, on the African continent, when it comes to what is called CVRS, meaning Civil Registration and Vital Statistics, when you look at the continent, number one is Egypt. Their nationals are 98% documented. Number two is South Africa. Unfortunately, we are still at 89% documentation. The reason being that Egypt started putting Home Affairs offices in hospitals before us. We started in 2020, and the very month we started, we were stopped by COVID. But now we have restarted, and we believe we're going to cover. There are countries that are still at 5% documentation. Up until the beginning of this year, DRC was at 0% documentation. So I don't know whether all the people living in the DRC are going to be called by another name, because they are all undocumented. So I just want to challenge the person who asked this question about terminology, documentation, and xenophobia. It is the type of things that South Africa impose on themselves, which no other nation does. And I'm not going to be allowed to be put in that same pool of somehow finding ourselves as a country guilty for something that we are not guilty of. I reject that with the contempt it deserves. The issue of localization. I'm not sure whether transaction advisors can help with that one. Yes, yeah, please. Any one of you, yeah.
Thank you. I think we all agree that localization is an industrial and socio-economic development policy of government. It finds expression in many instruments, statutory and policy. So in line with that, this procurement is fully giving effect to government socio-economic development policies and industrial policies. Understanding the various law reforms that are going on in the space, we have ensured that the regime that will apply to this procurement is consistent with the applicable legal requirements as a minimum. How that has been ensured is consistent with the Preferential Procurement Policy Framework Act, is that the award or the selection of a successful bidder will ultimately, after it has been shown that their solution works, that is technically sound, will then go into what is often referred as Part C evaluation, which is a price and SED evaluation. And that will be evaluated on a 90-10 basis. That is, price will account for 90 points, and then SED will account for 10 points. But to maximize and ensure, Minister did speak about jobs, did speak about localization, to ensure that it delivers. In the agreement itself, PPP, which is out in the public as part of this RFP, is we have set out certain minimum thresholds which would expect any successful private party to commit to. When you see the RFP, you will see those numbers are consistent with everything government has said today, and none of are exclusionary, is make a proposal in line with those minimum thresholds, which are consistent with applicable law. So that's how localization and local content will be achieved through this procurement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I also forgot before I go on this issue of undocumentation and xenophobia and using the word foreign, which is used all over the world, etc. I want to add onto this issue. There are people in this country who believe anybody who doesn't have any documents is the fault of Home Affairs. We're not doing our work. There are people who don't want to be documented. They exist because they know that they were not supposed to be here. Even for South Africans who are not documented, it's not all the time that is Home Affairs that is at fault, because there's no program in Home Affairs and there's no budget in which we go house to house to find out who's not documented. All the long queues we find in Home Affairs, people come on their own. The fact that we are putting Home Affairs offices in hospitals is that we have got a policy to document or give birth certificates 30 days after birth. Because if you do it after 30 days, it becomes complex. And I also want to add, because people were asking us how it came about, I gave you the figures today and the percentages, because they thought the issue of Thabo Bester is something that is out of this world. He was undocumented, yes, until he became 37 years. And it's because he was not going to any Home Affairs office to get documentation. His own mother only got documentation at the age of 36. That's not unusual for our continent, unfortunately. That's why many international bodies, including AU, WHO, etc., launch, and coincidentally it was launched in Durban in 2010, a project called CRVS, meaning Civil Registration and Vital Statistics. Because unfortunately, on this continent of Africa, there are people who are born, get married, and die without it being recorded anywhere whatsoever. So the figures I was giving you about EGB number 1, ASP number 2, on civil registration and vital statistics is exactly what is known even internationally about how far are we. So when people say, no, somebody's undocumented, and if, because there are also people who believe that if everybody gets documented, all the problems of South Africa will come to an end. Will they? If everybody within these borders, regardless of where they come from, is documented, will the problem of housing, will the problem of jobs, will the problems of lack of accommodation, will the problems the economy is experiencing, will they come to an end? Obviously not. And lastly, does anybody accept me to call a Zamazama an undocumented person? It's an illegal person who came here to do illegality. And there is no way on earth that you'll ever want to be documented whatsoever. There's no Zamazama on earth. Unless you arrest him and subject them to certain things, you won't be. So I'm not prepared to call him, he's just an undocumented person. He's an illegal person. And if he comes from another country, he becomes an illegal migrant because he came specifically for that purpose of doing illegal things. And there is no way you'll be in touch with authorities. And I'm challenging anybody as I'm standing here. We have got 5 refugee reception centers in the country where people who come into our country as refugees and asylum seekers can go and register there. The first one is in Musina. The biggest one is here, a few meters from where I am, the Desmond Dusu Refugee Reception Center in Marabastad. The third one is in Cape Town. We've just opened a state-of-the-art facility there earlier this year. The fourth one is in Gqeberha, and the last one is in Tekwini. Anybody who appear there and announce themselves that I'm in South Africa will be documented, will be given a Section 24 permit. Whether they qualify for refugee status or not, that will be determined later. But the moment, just by the fact of showing themselves up there, they will be given a Section 22 permit, not 24. A Section 24 permit means you are now a bona fide refugee. But the Section 22 simply means you announce yourself and your presence here. And we give them that document, won't refuse. Even if you are to take 1,000 people today to go to any one of our centers to announce themselves, they will be documented by way of a Section 22 permit. So I would like people in future to talk about what they know, not what they dream about. They have to know the facts, and then it's then that they can talk.